moderator for today's webinar. InfoTrends is the world's leading market research and strategic consulting firm for the digital imaging and document solutions industry. We have networks throughout the offices throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia, and that gives us a global perspective on evolving technologies and best practices used by organizations to increase the return generated by their communication. In our search, we uncovered Kim Gross and her company, Pacesetter Enterprises, and we were particularly impressed with the tremendous success they were having in combining traditional media like print with digital media to increase fundraising revenues for the colleges and universities that they work with in the United States. Kim Gross, who's our speaker today, is the Director of Sales and Marketing at Pacesetter Enterprises in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Pacesetter has been leading the way in the communications and printing industries for more than 25 years, and they offer highly effective cross-channel marketing programs that integrate both print and digital communication. Kim herself has spent the last 7 years working in the higher education industry, helping schools of all sizes with their annual fund efforts. Several of Pacesetter's clients include Rosemont College, St. Francis University, Kutztown University, and Lafayette College. Welcome, Kim. I'm sure I speak to the audience on our webinar as well as myself. We are excited to hear about your successes and to hear your insight regarding how schools can more effectively leverage their donor communication. But before we turn it over to Kim, the slide up on your screen, it demonstrates that we have the audience on mute today so that we can minimize the distractions for Kim, but you can still submit your questions. Just look at your dashboard and you'll see a place to add your questions. I'll be watching and we'll relay them to Kim as she speaks. So Kim, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Kate. I'm so excited to have everybody on today, and I'm hoping that you walk away with some great tips as you continue to launch your 2015 fiscal year. So Kate already took care of some of the introductions. I'll quickly go over that again. I'll talk about some of the challenges that are facing annual funds across the country today and what's required for success and what some of the successful schools are doing. I'll help you put it all together, so as we move forward, what can we do? And I'll leave you with some next steps so that when you get off this webinar in the next 60 minutes, you'll be able to take some of these ideas and implement them right away with your team. So as Kate said, she's the director at InfoTrends, and they've been doing a ton of research and have been, helping companies like Pacesetter, look for new and exciting things to introduce to the market. I am Kim Gross, the Director of Sales and Marketing at Pacesetter, and we've been working in this industry for at least 7 years, really helping them to grow annual fund dollars and participation. So I'm super excited to share some of what we found with you today. Some challenges that schools are facing across the board. There's that generational attitude towards giving where younger donors just don't feel like they need to give back. Giving back isn't enough. They want to see impact. They want to see what you're doing with their dollars. And, most of them, it's hard to even get them to commit to making a gift because they don't feel like they have to be giving back to their alma mater. They're also facing some substantial college debt. There was a study that was done in the class of 2013, and it shows that they're averaging $35,000 worth of college debt, which is the highest it's been. So, that's also affecting our schools because not only are they trying to go after these younger donors who don't feel the need to give back, they're going after young donors who don't have the means necessarily to make large contributions to an organization. So they're dealing with a lot of things. They've got the cards stacked against them. And they're also seeing some difficulty integrating new fundraising approaches. So they know that they need to do it, but they're having a hard time integrating that. And what's making that even harder is that our prospects and our donors, they're expecting personalization and high levels of it. They want to know that we know who they are, and they want to know that they want to make sure that we're paying attention to that. So when they receive a solicitation, it needs to speak to them, and if it doesn't, they're just tossing it. So there's a lot of pressure going on in the annual fund offices across the country. We also have a lack of engagement, especially with that millennial group, which we talked about. When I first started really working in this industry, it was that 1980s decade that was so tough to get to convert, and it seemed like as soon as we started to break ground on that, we had this millennial group that just started to show some really weird behavior. So we've had to adapt some new practices to get them to make a gift and to get them engaged. We're also seeing some declining participation. So even though giving is up, So the gift amounts are up, participation is down. In fact, there was a study that was done in 2012, and it stated that less than 10% of alumni give to their alma mater. And, that's combined with public and private schools, so it's a little skewed. Obviously, the public schools are skewing that a little lower than it needs to be, but still, the number is dropping. And what we're finding is that with all of these nonprofit organizations out there, I think the last number that was, or the study that was done showed that there was 1.5 million nonprofits on the market today. There's so much competition. So we're competing against all of these other nonprofit organizations, and that's part of why participation is down, because these people don't have the funds to support 4 or 5 different organizations. They have to pick maybe their top 2. So we have to make sure that as an institution, we're at the top of that list. We're also seeing that communicating today is getting much more complex, which I think we all know. I mean, there's so many channels out there. You've got smartphones, you've got web, you've got email, you've got, your traditional direct mail, you've got billboards. You just have so many avenues that people are getting information that it's just making it so complex, and it's increasing the competition for the attention of our prospects. So we almost need to make sure that we're on these social media platforms and that we're on the smartphones and we're developing apps and we're sending emails that are effective, and it can become incredibly overwhelming, especially when you have a small staff. The other thing that we're seeing, and I talked about this a little bit, is that donors and prospects are demanding relevance. So on all of these outbound channels, we need to include relevant content, and that's a lot of work. We've seen staff be cut in half, so now where there was an annual fund staff of maybe 4 people, it's maybe 1.5 to 2. So how do we add relevance with limited resources while we're trying to communicate on multiple channels? So how are the successful schools doing it? What are they doing? Well, the first thing they're doing is really focusing on retention and cultivation of their current donors. So obviously, it's easier to get a subsequent gift from somebody who's already made a gift. So how can we make sure that we're getting at least 80 to 85% of last year's donors to make their gift again? How are we cultivating these current donors to increase their gift size? So that's the first thing they're focusing on. The second thing that they're really focusing on is that personalization and segmentation of their list. So again, this is something that's difficult to do. It's something that takes some time, and the successful schools are realizing, we need to invest in this because this is how we're going to grow, and this is how we're going to grow our participation and make more money. Something else they're doing is really transitioning from offset production of their printed appeals to more of a digital approach so that they can quickly and easily test messaging. We can't, in today's world, wait until the end of the fiscal year to realize that our approach didn't work. We need to know that quickly. So after that first appeal goes out, we need to know what worked and what didn't work and for what segments. And so the successful schools are saying, okay, you know what, we're going to stop sending these static, standardized solicitation letters, and we're going to start testing different messaging with different groups, and we're going to be able to quickly tell what's working and what's not. And as we go throughout the year, we're going to start to make some changes.
Hey,
so what aren't they doing?
Hey, Kim, we have a question.
Sure.
Sure. So the question is, can you give us some insight into the types of, I'm interpreting the question, the types of things you're testing for in that messaging?
Absolutely. So you want to see, okay, what types of giving messages work for young alums? So is it new buildings going up on campus? Is it where the annual fund dollars are going? Is it specific to their major? Is it specific to athletics? Is it a message from the president? Is it a message from a professor? Is it messaging from current students? Is it messaging from peers, so alums that they may have graduated with? Because all different groups will respond differently. So for example, millennials typically like to respond to people that either their peers or really well-known outgoing professors, whereas your older donors and your older prospects who graduated quite a few years ago, they like to get that message from the president. They like to know that they're in a certain giving society, whereas millennials don't necessarily care about that. So those are some things that we start to look at. For institutions that have a lot of Greek life, what if we utilize some Greek life information or tie them back to their affiliation with their fraternity or sorority? Who does that work with? And that can sometimes change based on the age of the donor.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
No problem. So what aren't they doing? They're not using messy data. So this is the first thing we have to look at. How clean is our database? What do we know about these prospects? Is it accurate? The worst thing that you can do is start to segment with inaccurate data. So you want to make sure that your data is clean and you're able to use it. They're not avoiding the use of relevance. I'm going to be driving that home today because I think it's such a critical component of any successful annual fund program. You have to make it relevant, so they're embracing it. They're not running from it. They're also not eliminating direct mail, and this is something that I get asked all the time. Is print dead? Do we eliminate direct mail and just focus on social media and email? And the answer is absolutely not. I think you can cut down on the number of direct mail appeals that you're sending and who you're sending it to, but I don't think you can eliminate it altogether. They're also not asking for money in every communication, and this is critical. The biggest pet peeve that prospects have with their alma mater is that the only time we hear from you is when you want money. So what we need to do is make sure that we're sending out some goodwill emails, some just general institution announcement emails that showcase what you're doing at the school, maybe some fun events you're having, maybe do something around the holidays, do something around graduation. It doesn't have to have an ask in it at all. Because that's a big pet peeve of prospects, is that the only time you reach out to us is when you're asking for a few dollars. So we need to overcome that. They're also avoiding sending impersonal thank you notes. So gone are the days where you can just send that receipt with a static thank you for your gift to XYZ University Annual Fund, with a signature from somebody in the Annual Fund office. Now they need to be personalized. So you need to thank them for their gift. Maybe thank them if they're a consistent donor, thank them for their past 6 years of contributing to the annual fund, and here are some things that your dollars will help us to accomplish this year. And they're also not using a one-size-fits-all approach, which we've talked about as well. So they know that they need to use some other methods, they need to use different strategies depending on their segment, and they're embracing that and not running from it.
Hey, Kim, we have another question.
Sure.
Do you have a rule of thumb of sorts on that ratio between solicitation messaging and just keeping in touch with your audience?
Absolutely. So if you're going to be sending about 4 to 6 solicitations each year, which is the general rule of thumb, you want to send 4 to 6 appeals, you want to be thanking them or sending them some goodwill emails, as I call them, 2 to 3 times a year. So that's about the dynamics of what you want to use.
Okay,
you
great.
really don't want to be sending more than 6 solicitations a year because that's overkill. So if you can keep it within that limit, you're good.
Are there any indications that you get to the point of diminished returns on the number of communications per year?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A good way to look at that is if you're doing email communication, you'll start to see the open rate drop. You'll start to see your opt-out rate go up. You'll start to see your click-through rate drop. So that is a very quick way to be able to determine if you're overloading your prospects. Another thing that you can look at is what's the return on, how many BRCs are coming back or how many online gifts are coming back for the direct mail that you're sending. So those are 2 things that you can look at. Email is the quickest and most effective way to be able to gauge prospect involvement.
Okay, terrific.
So some keys to success. Your messaging has to be consistent in all of your outbound channels. I think this is something that is really important as you start to integrate new channels into your annual fund campaigns. You really need to make sure that your messaging is consistent, because if it's not, it's just going to confuse your prospects. So make sure that you have one branded message that you use throughout the year. You also want to analyze the giving behavior of your donors at the beginning of the fiscal year. So this is something that you should be doing now. You want to look at when they're giving and how they're giving. And we'll talk about why that's important. This will be a way for you to start to cut back on your direct mail. If they're only giving in the spring, and for the past 7 years they've given in the spring, let's cut down on how much we're communicating with them via direct mail in the fall. We'll still send them something, but maybe we're not sending them 2 to 3 direct mail appeals. Maybe we're only sending them 1 or 2. And we'll hit them hard in the spring when they're more apt to make a gift. If they're mainly giving online and they've shown that behavior for, at least 3 to 4 years, and they're always making their gift online, and they're always making their gift after an email sent, maybe we cut down their direct mail appeals from 4 to 2, and we communicate with them mainly via email. So those are some things that you definitely want to look at before you launch your annual fund campaign for the year. You also want to integrate multiple channels to maximize your outreach efforts. So one thing that happens frequently is we start to add relevance to direct mail and to email. And we start to really segment those channels. And schools will think, okay, I can stop calling, I can stop having my annual fund officers make outreach efforts because the relevant tactics are going to take over for that. And that couldn't be further from the truth. These relevant tactics are supposed to enhance all of your other efforts. So a lot of times we'll be adding all of these relevant tactics to the direct mail and the email, and schools will launch their calling program and will be able to help prioritize their giving list for them. And as they make these calls, because the alums are receiving these pieces that are so personalized, they're more apt to make their pledge on the phone, to make their gift. So they're starting to see increased success in the phone-a-thon programs as well, which is really cool to see. The other thing you want to do is simplify the process to maximize ROI. So that's really where we talk about smart segmenting. I mean, you could probably go crazy. Some schools have tons and tons of data, and they want to use all of it, and it just doesn't make sense. So you want to look at your data, see where the areas are that you think will be the most effective, and use those. Also start with using outbound channels that you think will be the most effective. So if right now you're only doing direct mail and phone-a-thon, maybe it makes sense just to start integrating some email, some online giving, maybe softly launch some stuff on your Facebook page. You don't want to, right out of the gate, throw all of these outbound channels against the wall and you become overwhelmed that you can't manage them properly. You also want to track your donor and prospect activity and start scoring them based on their engagement and their donor history. So this is where we look at our LIBUNT list, our SciBunt list, our non-donor list, and throughout the year, we apply scores to every individual record based on what they're doing. So a LIBUNT will start with a higher score, and every email they open and they click on, and all of their landing pages, all the links they click on, we're tracking that for our institutions. So when they start their calling program, we're able to say, here's your top 5% of LIBUNTs from last year, start with them. Here's your top 10% of SciBunts from last year, call them next. And we're able to help them take a list of maybe 10,000 names and funnel that down to maybe the top 2,500 so that they're getting the most impact in their calling program.
Kim, are there other things that you want to build into that tracking as well for the, trying to track the engagement level, if you will, of that audience? Other things that you can also do to track that?
Yeah, I mean, you can track things. It doesn't just have to be on the solicitations that you send. You can track engagement at events, different activities that you have, if they participate in different career programs that you may have as an institution. I think the important thing is we can't just look at they're making a gift or they're not making a gift. We have to look at how engaged they are in the process. We have to look at how engaged are our non-donors and how many of them are we converting and what are we doing with them throughout the year. So I think that's why we're starting to find that it's really important to look at the big picture and how engaged they are throughout the year, and then what we need to do, how do we take those top prospects and convert them into donors. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's a great answer.
Okay. The other thing that we need to do throughout the year is integrate a thorough stewardship process. I think this may be an area where schools kind of fall off the wagon a little bit. They work so hard to get that gift that once that gift comes in, they're just moving on to the next because they need to. But we need to keep in mind that when somebody makes a contribution to an annual fund, they want to be reminded what that gift has done. So we need to make a cognitive effort to continually thank them and remind them of how impactful their gift is. And that's going to help that whole retention rate. So if they know that they're going to make a gift of $150 to the annual fund in the fall, and we're going to continue to thank them throughout the year and update them on things that are happening at the institution, it'll be easier for us to get that gift next year. So some roadblocks, some things that we find that, this process looks great, but we just don't have the money to spend on all of these additional outbound channels. Our budget's been already outlined for the year. Well, the interesting thing is that a lot of times budgets don't go up. So it's all about being smarter in how you spend your money. So it goes back to that whole direct mail thing. Are we sending too much direct mail? Are we sending it to people that it just doesn't make sense to send to? Are we spending too much money on our alumni magazine? Should we be sending to a year? So there are things we can look at. Can we take some of the money that we're saving for on the direct mail and the alumni magazine, and can we put it towards spending time on segmenting our data and sending more relevant communications? So it's all about looking at your budget and looking at your dollars, looking at where it's going, and looking at ways that you can cut back. The other question or concern we get a lot is that schools sometimes think they don't have the data to support lots of segmenting. And my response to that, after working with schools for almost a decade now, is that you really probably have more usable data than you think. And it's just a matter of having somebody else come in and help you look at that to see what's effective. It doesn't have to be extremely complex to be successful. And I think that's the thing that the schools get hung up on. There are some simple things that we can look at that can help drive relevance and to help make the messaging more impactful.
Kim, can you give us some ideas on some simple segmentation strategies that you've seen in action or you've employed yourself?
Absolutely. The easiest thing you can do is the age of the donor or prospect. So we take, especially when it comes to traditional alums, it's the easiest way to go about it because we can look at graduation year. We can look at their major. So almost every institution has the degree that they graduated with. So right off the bat, if you're not tracking any affiliation or any involvement while they're at the institution, you can use those two things. You can also use donor history. So those are three areas that you can start with that we can use to build a successful segmented campaign off of. So some things to look at, and we talked about this a little bit, but you really want to look at when your donors are typically making their gift. So if they're giving at specific times, that's when we're going to start hitting them hard with our communication, because that's how you're going to start to cut down some of your direct mail. If you have somebody who typically makes a gift in the spring, why are we hitting them hard in the fall? We still want to communicate with them in the fall, but we want to take a lot of our time and effort and focus on that in the spring. How are they giving? Again, if you have groups of donors that are consistently giving online, instead of sending them 4 to 6 direct mail appeals a year, let's send them 1 or 2, and let's focus our efforts on email solicitations. So that's where we can help, take that budget that you have now and tweak it so that you're not spending more. You're just going about things in a smarter way. Who are we sending our printed? Sure, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that we've seen in our studies and analysis of all these campaigns is that print is turning out to be a great resuscitator of the relationship. So your digital channels have gone dormant, for instance, and then you're using print to get them back engaged in the process. Can you tell us a little bit about how you apply that learning and decide which channel to focus on based on what they've been doing?
Absolutely. So typically, when we look at a database, we'll say, okay, Libunts definitely need to be getting some printed appeals consistently, just because they're giving pretty consistently throughout the year. So if it's a first-year Libunt, we definitely hit them hard throughout the year because we want to get that second gift. If they're a consistent Libunt, we may look at when they typically give to see how many printed appeals we get. Sibunts, we typically send at least 3 times a year, sometimes 4, just because they're not consistently giving. Non-donors, this is where it can sometimes get a little tricky. We look at the best times of the year to try and get them to make a gift. Obviously, end of calendar year is huge because everyone's looking to use something as make a tax-deductible gift. So we may just be communicating with them electronically, but once we hit November, December, this is when we start to hit them with print. So, they've gotten some emails from us. They may or may not be consistently reading them, but that's where we kind of shock their system and send them something really cool, in print. And then we also do something at the end of the fiscal year, which is typically June 30th for most institutions. That's when we'll definitely try and hit non-donors again to say we only have a few days left, make your gift. But we definitely aren't sending them more than 2 printed appeals a year, but we are including direct mail because it's, again, another channel that will grab their attention if email alone isn't doing it.
Great, thanks so much. That's valuable information.
So what types of print pieces are we sending to each segment? Again, our consistent donors are consistently receiving pieces that are much nicer than non-donors or very inconsistent donors. So for our non-donors or those stipends that give every 5 or 6 years, we may send a traditional 8.5 by 14 letter at the end of the fiscal year, and maybe at the end of the calendar year they get something that's a little bit nicer, but it's definitely not something as nice as the consistent donors get. Again, this is where we help our clients save money on the print that they're sending. So we want to make sure if we have somebody who typically makes a gift of $25, we don't want to be sending this beautiful, full color 4-page brochure that they're A, not going to read, and B, it's not going to be worth the gift size that they make. The other thing we want to look at is how committed are we to email solicitations. And consistency is always the key, and with email, it's such a cost-effective way to communicate with our prospects and our donors that we want to make sure that we're hitting them as much as possible. So how often do we send them? Are we sending them too much? Are we not sending them enough? Who's getting them? Again, email communication is something, it's a little different than direct mail. It costs pennies to send. You're not worrying about postage. You're not worrying about print costs. So you can send typically more consistently emails to more people than you do direct mail. How are they tied into the rest of the solicitation calendar? So when I work with schools, whether I'm working with a specific segment of the annual fund or the entire annual fund, I want to see what the communication calendar looks like for the entire institution. Because to the prospect, anything coming from your school, whether it's fundraising-based, athletic-based, a message coming from the president, it's all coming from the same place. So the last thing we want to do is send a solicitation out the same week as other email communications are going out from the institution. So it's really important to make sure that everything's tied together. And again, this is where we start talking about, are we sending some emails without a hard ask for a gift? Because again, that's a big pet peeve that prospects have with institutions. It's the only time we hear from you is when you need money. Okay, moving on. So what are some elements that can boost annual fund campaigns? One of the things that we're seeing a lot of is the integration of relevant videos. We're doing this all the time now. It seems more and more of our clients are wanting us to add this into their programs. It'll add a significant impact to your outbound solicitations. It's, instead of reading the information in your emails on your website, they're able to hear from people that they recognize, from influential people at the institution. And the other great thing about this is that it can be hosted really anywhere, your website, your social media pages. You can send it in email. So even after that initial blast is done with this video, you can get a lot of longevity from it. And we are seeing a ton of success from including these in campaigns that we do. The other thing that we're doing a lot more of are personalized microsites. So this is where we are able to provide some relevant information to the recipient, which speeds up the engagement process, which ultimately speeds up that giving process. So, for example, we can have a video on a personalized microsite that's relevant to the individual. So we just wrapped up filming for one of our clients where we had a series of 6 or 7 videos that we shot, and the message was relevant based on the donor type. So live ones got a specific message if they made a gift last fall. We segmented out young alumni. We segmented out their large donors. Non-donors got a specific message. So we're able to speak directly to them, adding some video elements to it, but it's really based on one of the segments that we're using for the year. What these personalized microsites also allow you to do is better track donor behavior. So what are they clicking on? What are they looking at? We want to know all this information so that when we have an annual fund officer call them or we send out that next email, we're seeing that they're consistently clicking on athletic information or they're consistently clicking on information about a capital campaign that we're launching. So we're going to use some of that information in the next solicitation piece. So what does the process look like? Let's put it together. So we traditionally start with 2 channels, direct mail and email, and we lead them to that personalized microsite. So we're tracking their engagement in the email. Are they clicking on the email? They're opening it, clicking through to the microsite. What are they doing on that microsite? Are they watching a video? Are they clicking on making a gift? Are they going to the website? Are they clicking on specific pages of our website from the microsite? And we're tracking all of that. So this is where we start to add those scores to the prospect's history so we can see what they're doing, what they're looking at. And based on their scores and what they're clicking on and what they're looking at, we determine where they go next. Do we dump them into the top of the phone-a-thon channel? Do we send them another direct mail piece that's relevant based on the information that we gathered over here on the microsite? Or are they that big of a prospect that we're going to shoot them directly out to an annual fund officer and have them call to make the gift? So as you can see, what used to be static direct mail and static email has now turned into this really integrated process where we're able to learn a ton of information on our prospects, our donors, our non-donors, just by what they're looking at and just by what they're doing. And we're able to do this in real time and provide reports in real time to the institution. So on the fly, they can decide who they're calling, who's getting dumped back into the funnel, and who's getting spit out to an annual fund officer. So let's take a look at what these pieces look like. You've got your direct mail, you've got your email, and you've got your personalized landing page. So here's just some examples of some segments that you can use. Again, sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want, but for the sake of the webinar, we just pulled some popular information. So contact information seems pretty standard, which it is. But what we found is people are changing their phone numbers and their email addresses like crazy. So we populate that information, particularly on the BRC. So when somebody gets this information or gets this solicitation, they make their gift, they're saying, okay, that's not my email address. They're crossing it off. They're putting their correct email address down. Or that's my home phone number. Here's my cell phone number. So schools are able to update contact information rather quickly. We're also including variable ask amounts. This has become a critical component for any outbound piece. What we found is that donors will typically pick the middle option in regards to gift size. We've also found that a lot of donors don't recall what they've given in previous years. So we'll take their last gift as a starting point and we'll build from there, which is how we've been able to get between 85 and 90% on average of the schools we work with that we've employed this method have either increased their gift from the previous year or have given what they've given in the past. So we're starting to eliminate these donors dropping their gift size year after year. We're also really recognizing their donor status. So if they've made a gift last fall, you better believe that we're recognizing that in their appeals this fall. You know, thanking them for their gift last fall, asking them to renew their gift before a certain date, so giving them a deadline of something like October 31st so that we can utilize their dollars as effectively as possible and let our students benefit from that as quickly as possible. If they're a lapsed donor, they're a SIBUNT, they don't give every year, we're recognizing that. If they were a first-time donor last year, we're recognizing that as well because we want them we want to make sure that they know how much we appreciate their gift and their commitment to the institution. Again, major is something that we can focus on, whether it's graphically or through quotes. We do quotes from current students within that major. We do images. We do some copy. Sky's the limit. And, an example of how we can tie athletics into it as well. And so here's what an example of a personalized microsite looks like. Again, you can have a variable video or image. That's what I talked about, where we are currently doing a lot of variable videos based on the person, so that can be populated here. Variable copy based upon whatever segmentation you want to use. Something we found with the annual fund is that a lot of our prospects and donors don't get that we're on a July 1 through June 30th calendar year, or fiscal year. So we want to make sure that we have that countdown continuously going on all of their microsites so that they know that June 30th is the last day they can make a gift account for the annual fund this year. Again, social media is huge. We have their giving link down at the bottom. Again, this is just a very, very simple example of what can be done, but again, sky's the limit.
Can we have a question coming in that
sure.
Was asking for some other suggestions on things that you might build into that landing page that would give you tracking mechanisms?
Absolutely. So some things that we put on there are specific links to parts of your website. So capital campaign page, athletics page, maybe there's an events page, maybe you have a Young Alumni Association page, link back to the school that they graduated from, so School of Business, School of Health Science, or whatever. If you want to build, we built some other sub-pages for clients that speak specifically to the segment. So if it's a young alum, there might be some specific information we want to get to them, so there will be a page for young alum. If you have a giving challenge, you can put a giving challenge link on there. We've done some microsites that looked like a smartphone app. So there was different apps based on the donor that or prospect that received it based on their segment. So it really depends on the school and what you want to track, but you can add as much or as little as you'd like.
Kim, it seems to me that you'd also be able to cut down on other communication that's going out because of this great integration. For instance, reunion information, let's say. Have you been able to do that as well?
Absolutely, and that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. We've been able to cut down on, so a lot of times you have, we'll take the reunion example. So you're sending out your annual fund solicitations, and you're also sending out information about your reunion. Well, we're able to, in the annual fund solicitation, to include all of the reunion information as well. We're able to put that on the personalized microsite. So now instead of sending out 4 to 6 solicitations and 2 to 3 reminders about the reunion, you're still only sending 4 to 6 solicitations. You have that personalized microsite. They can go back for more information. They can go there to register. But that's a great example of how you can use segmentation and relevant data to beef up the outbound channels that you're using and cut down on the number of times you're communicating with your prospects. Great question. Okay, so moving on to the solution schematic and how it works. What do we do? How do we make it work for you? So you want to start with some data modeling and analytics. Again, this is where we look at your data and see what you have. We look at what's working, and we look at what segments we may want to use. So, the reunion example was a great example of that. We then apply that to some outbound carriers, primarily direct mail and email that get sent to your prospects. They go to their personalized microsites or personalized landing pages. That's where we capture that relevant information. Where are they clicking? Are they registering? Are they viewing these videos? How many times have they gone to their personalized microsite? Those are all things that we look at. And based on their score and based on what they're doing, that's when we determine what future outbound channels they receive. And we track all of those results and send them to the institution. So pretty simplistically, that's what the model looks like. So let's talk about this multi-channel process and response rate and get down to the nitty-gritty of the statistics and what sort of increase in results we're seeing. So we're seeing 45, so for multi-channel campaigns over a single channel, so if you're just doing direct mail or you're just doing email or print-only campaigns, we're seeing a 17% lift in conversion rates, which is huge. So if you're integrating multiple channels more than just print, so email, maybe you're doing some things on social media, integrating these personalized microsites, on average we're seeing a 17% lift in conversion rates. And when we add this relevance, so we add the relevant tactics like reunion information, donor segment, we're seeing a 50% response rate over static print-only campaigns. So as you can see, adding relevance, adding multiple channels works. It takes a little more time, but the numbers speak for themselves. So some cornerstones for success, some things to kind of leave you with before we move on to some things that you can put into place today. When you engage alumni through multiple channels, your response rate grows minimum 10 to 15%. The latest study is showing 17%, but on minimum, that's what we found. You're building relationships. So again, adding relevant data and adding relevance to any sort of marketing plan or any sort of fundraising plan, that's the largest lever on response. So we need to build relationships. We need to build genuine relationships. In order to do that, we need to make sure that we're speaking to the prospects. We also need to track what we're doing and use it. This may be something that I think a lot of us forget to do, and we're always there to remind you of this. Once we track the information, we have to use it. So we have to track everything that they're doing, and then we have to apply that to future outbound pieces. So your cross-channel approach is what we've been talking about today. Obviously improves response. I think we've talked about that quite a bit. It speeds up the solicitation cycle. So, we're getting them on a level that means something to them. We're speaking directly to them. We're engaging them, and that's ultimately going to speed up your solicitation cycle. It improves the productivity of your staff. So we're able to cut out those prospects that are just never going to make a gift. They're not engaged at all. We're able to apply all of that learning and all of that knowledge so we can say to your team, here's the top 20% of your prospects to focus on this fall. So instead of, going through a list of 10 to 15,000 names, we're going to give you the top 20% based on activity. The retention, this is something that a lot of schools are talking about. They need to improve it. This process will increase your retention. We're focusing on stewardship. We're focusing on speaking directly to the recipient, and ultimately it's going to get them to give year after year. And we're also giving you a methodology for continuous improvement. Again, we can't wait until June 30th to realize that our plan for the year didn't work. So we need to make sure that we have a system in place where after every solicitation goes out, whether it's online, through print, whatever it may be, your calling program, we're tracking things and we're looking at ways to constantly improve what we're doing. So future of fundraising, it's obviously profoundly multi-channel. Again, the days of just sending out some direct mail appeals are long gone. The days of just making phone calls are long gone. You have to use the web. You have to integrate all of your tactics. Something that we're finding a lot of is that the reason for somebody to make a gift may be impossible to track. So we can't just tie a gift to a solicitation letter that we sent out. We also can't tie it directly to a phone call that we made. It's the process. It's the emails that we send that connect with the direct mail that we send, that connect with the calls that we make, that connect with what's on our website and what's on our Facebook and Twitter pages. So we need to look at the whole picture and say, okay, this mix of outbound channels worked this year. This mix didn't work this year. This mix worked for this segment. So those are things that we have to start looking at. And in order to do that, we need to have a database that tracks all of these channels and the interactions that they have. I think that the role of social networks is evolving. It's becoming really important. I said a few years ago as I was talking to schools that eventually your Facebook page and your Twitter page are going to become just as critical as your website. And I think we've reached that point. A lot of people are on Facebook. A lot of people are on Twitter. That's how they're communicating. That's how they're communicating with their peers. So if we're not there now, we need to be. And we need to be cultivating those millennials or Gen Ys now. So, they're not going to be making the biggest gifts. Their participation will probably still be, less than some of our other groups, but we need to start cultivating them now and investing in them now because 10 years from now, they're going to be the future of our fundraising campaigns. Big thing, if nothing else, make sure that you're focusing on your content. It's critical. You need to make sure that you're getting that right message out to the right person at the right time. You can send a beautiful direct mail piece. You can send the most amazing email with the best video. But if the content isn't what the person wants to hear or see, it's not going to mean anything to them. So what I'd like to do is leave you with some next steps, some things that you can take with you as you finalize your 2015 annual fund campaigns. First, perform a relevance review of your current content. What do you have? What's working? What's not working? Start there. Then look at your data to determine some key items. Who's giving? How are they giving? And when are they giving? Again, this is going to be a great way for you to cut down on maybe what you're sending and how you're sending it to them. Once you do that, that's when you modify your annual fund tactics. So even if you already have your plan in place for the year, it's still early enough to go back and to make some revisions based on some of the learning that we've done today. And when all else fails, look to others who've already done this successfully. So it can be a lot to bite off. It can be a lot to undertake, especially if you're a small school with 1 or 2 people who are handling the entire annual fund and you're being pulled in multiple directions. So capitalize on the success of others and look at things that they've done.
And I'll just reinforce that. We completed a recent study based on the size of the marketing departments of enterprises and organizations, and clearly the smaller the group, the less they're able to utilize the data that they're collecting. That boils down to just not having the time to do it and having plenty of other things to do. So what we're seeing is that organizations that look at partnering up with someone who can give them that allows them to increase the productivity and effectiveness of that smaller staff that they have.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Kate. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Because we've wrapped up a little early, so we do have some time.
We don't have any questions coming in. Let's give our audience a couple minutes or a couple seconds to type in any remaining questions that they might have. Kim, I'll ask you a question while we're seeing if they come into focus here. Any questions come in? You know, what's the biggest thing that you are looking for or that you think is going to happen in the future regarding communicating with alumni and driving revenue?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of what we're seeing now is that the presence, we are doing more and more online. So more video, more web, more Facebook, more Twitter. Calling programs, while there's some big controversy over how effective they are, what we're finding is that it's still really effective with certain segments. We just need to get people engaged before we make those phone calls. So we're doing a lot of engagement campaigns on social media sites. We're doing a lot of smaller scale videos that are going viral on platforms like Facebook and Twitter that are, we're using certain hashtags to get people excited and involved. I think a great example of that in a larger scale is that ice bucket challenge that everybody's doing for ALS. On a smaller scale, we're starting to do a lot of that for institutions, getting peers involved and getting some really dynamic professors and staff and utilizing those social platforms to get people to make a gift, even if it's only $25 or $50, just to boost that participation.
So that's great. One of the things that we've recently noticed in our the studies that we've conducted too is the use of signage that's also linking back to these landing pages to engage alumni at sporting events and other group type settings where you have a lot of alumni in one location.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that as well. So definitely a lot of channels out there, lots going on, a lot of exciting things to capitalize on.
Okay, well, I guess you must have done such a great job in your presentation today, Kim, that no one has any additional questions. So I think we can wrap up a tad bit early and return everyone back to their busy work schedule.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, this webinar has been recorded, so you will be receiving a copy of this electronically. But if you have any questions in regards to the content that was shared with you today, you will be receiving a follow-up email, and you can reach out to the company that invited you to attend today. So thank you, Kate, so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate it, and you have a lot of insight on the industry and trends that are out there. So we appreciate your time this morning.
And I want to thank you for being so open with what you've learned and sharing your insight with the institutions that we had online today. That helps everyone be stronger and more effective in what they're doing. So we appreciate you sharing what you've learned over these last 7-8 years.
Thank you. Absolutely. So with that, we will let everyone get back to work. And we thank you for your time, and we'll hopefully be talking with you all very soon.